Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I'm unboxing Elgato's 4KX capture card. It retails for roughly $230 US. I'll include a link in the description. And in full disclosure, this unit was not furnished to me for review purposes, but rather I purchased it. So the 4KX was announced, I instantly ordered it, and that's because, at least on paper, this appears to be the best product of its kind ever made. So if, like me, you have a utility for an external capture card and want the flexibility of that card to be able to pass through and ultimately capture 4K at 144 Hz with HDR enabled, this is the only card, at least to my knowledge, that can do that on Earth. Now, AverMedia also has a similar product they launched a little while back, and I likely will end up reviewing that as well. But all of that aside, this is also less expensive than AverMedia's product, so it's definitely a pretty big flex from Elgato. They also launched their internal capture card, but I found that to be a little bit underwhelming, especially because, again, I favor having an external capability so that I could use this with multiple devices. I'm not, a streamer on Twitch, so I think if you're in that position, obviously the internal card makes a lot more sense, but also you have to remember the internal card does not, to my knowledge, have the ability to record or rather capture 4K at 144 Hz with HDR. So if you need that, this is the only way to go. And I have to say, I wasn't so excited about picking this up because, for those of you that subscribe, the last Elgato external capture card I bought was their 4K, I don't remember what the name of it was, right at the beginning of the pandemic. It was $400 and it was a complete nightmare. And when I reached out to Elgato, which, typically they are excellent with support, they treated me like I was the only person with a problem with that product. Now, ultimately, they refunded my money well outside of the return period because, like all of you that purchased that, I was not even a beta tester, an alpha tester. This product, I don't think we're going to see that. I've seen reviews like most of you, so I'm excited. And I love that they made this easy to open, or at least maybe I shouldn't have said that before I peeled it back, because sometimes these tear areas, they don't work out so well. But either way, I think that if you're a content creator like myself, you will easily find a justification for a product like this. On the packaging, Elgato talks about using this with iPads, gaming consoles, and PCs. I think PCs and gaming consoles make a lot of sense. The iPad stuff, I don't really understand why they would even list that as a supported device, but I guess it doesn't hurt since it works with it, right? But the majority, I'm not discounting mobile gaming or whatever you might want to do with the iPad and capture off of it, but I feel like this should work with an iPad or any Android tablet, so to have to market it that way seems like a reach. But hey, they did the marketing research, not me. And just before I get it out, again, high frame rate support, ultra low latency, of course, HDR10 capture, the tone mapping, which is critical, something that is still a mess in most cases if you plan to exclusively use this for HDR gaming. Audio input, of course, HDMI 2.1 interface, a must here in 24. And then my favorite part, USB 3.2 Gen 2, which means we have a 10 gigabit port on this, something that this business absolutely needs. And then, of course, the cables that are included. So really, for me, this is a jack of all trades, hopefully not a master of none, because it's going to do everything I want. It's going to be, if I want to capture in the best quality possible, granted, it's not capable of supporting my 8K ultra-wide monitor, but at least my 4K Asus OLED, I can do it. And then if I want to connect this to any camera I own and capture using it, I can do that. So there's just a lot of flexibility to having this little guy. And it's small, it's going to travel light, or never travel at all. And then if I want to connect this to any of my consoles, that's another, obviously, big plus, because plug and play is here to stay. And it should work that easily, unlike that last 4K disaster, which, of course, Elgato discontinued and pretended like that thing never existed, and I don't blame them. So your HDMI in, your HDMI out, and your Type-C port, and nothing else to talk about. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the stuff out of the box. And look, I'm curious how many of you ran out and purchased this because, again, I don't do research, marketing research in this field. It's not my main focus. I've always been a gamer. I cover a ton of gaming products, but like Twitch streaming is its own genre, and I respect that, and I generally stay in my lane. But this is a multifaceted product that serves a lot more than one purpose, and most capture cards to this point have been limited in their ability to capture 4K at a high refresh, a variable refresh rate, and to pass that through, more importantly, so you could actually play at that spec. So right now, for example, I game at 8K 120. I can't capture that with this. I'm pretty sure this card can do 8K though. I think. I'm not 100 on that, and don't buy it for that. But the ultra-wide standard is still a gray space. And if they don't support it right now, I would imagine they ultimately will find a way, because I don't think it's a hardware issue. I think it's more of an adoption issue and how many 8K monitors actually exist. Forget sell well. So ultra-wide is always going to be an issue with this. Of course, you got a nice braided HDMI 2.1 cable right here. Let's see. I'm pretty sure they'll tell us what the length was right here. How many meters are we looking at? So the Type-C cable is 150 centimeters, and the what they're calling the 8K HDMI cable, because after all, it's a 2.1, is 200 centimeters. So, I mean, that's decent. Nothing wrong with either of that. And there's that Type-C cable. Very thick braided cable. Quality feels good. That I expect. And look, I'm not demoing this right now. This is more of just, when I do unboxings like this, it's for those of you that subscribe that also want my take, my impressions, and why I purchased it, more importantly, because again, this is not a plant. I think, the headphone jack for monitoring, I presume, right there at the front, or rather connecting your headset is what I should say, not monitoring. And then LED for operational cues, I would imagine. So again, when you're using this card, I think the majority of gamers that are streaming for hobby or even pro, Twitch, we know, only historically has supported 1080p. So there hasn't been a lot of reasoning behind advancing this technology. I mean, they've had 4K capture for a while now, but nothing like this. And I see this progression as maybe being a turning of the corner for Twitch, which the bandwidth is there, even though this country, being the United States, if anyone was wondering where I am, should be at the top of the pyramid when it comes to bandwidth. We are not. Biggest consumer of products that depend on bandwidth, but somehow our institutions have determined that bandwidth is not a right, and at some point it should be, because the world runs on the internet these days, and for quite some time it has. So, not to sound like Yoda. So that's part of the reason, the capture cards have not, it reminds me of like how 4K was never adopted for television. No networks broadcast in 4K still, which is gross. But we had the same problems with, HD. Eventually HD got adopted, but after that, they just washed their hands of it. And then streamers came along. And that is the irony of this product. So until we get to the point that home end users have, access, there's no reason for Elgato to make something like this. And you could even say today, you might not think it's that practical. And many people, I feel like, that are going to get this are going to say, I'll grow with it, and I'm not going to use the 4K, because remember, it's got a ton of capture preferences and priorities, I should say. You don't need to have this for 4K. And at $230, I don't think the price is at all egregious. Again, AverMedia's Ultra Live HDMI 2.1 capture card that is external, just like this, I think it's a little under $300. I expect that price to drop quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they undercut Elgato and we see that at around $200 before we know it, just because that's part of, again, Elgato's market space and capability. They're just a bigger company with a bigger user base. Doesn't mean AverMedia doesn't make good products too, because I like what they've been putting out. And again, the 4KX is going to serve a lot of different purposes for me. I didn't need it just for 4K capture. But the thing that put it over the edge to pull the trigger on the order was knowing that if I want to capture how I actually game, I can now do that. And I think part of what ushered that in, obviously, was the 4000 series GPUs. I think people being able to finally game at 4K without worrying about hitting the frame rates and doing it at high refresh rates as well, is why we now have access to what I perceive as affordable and hopefully reliable 4K capture devices like this and the one from AverMedia. But that rounds things out. 4080, 4090, you're going to love this, presumably, if you actually want to see what your gaming looks like afterwards. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe and please stay safe. Later.